Greetings, this is Coley Aziza with Mariama Learning, where we support early learners' needs. So I've been so caught up in what's been going on in the country and the world, got a little distracted, but I'm back on task. We are going to finish our series on the IEP, and we're going to finish up with Supplementary Aids and Services, the service page on the IEP, and the LRE page, or the Least Restrictive Environment page. Now, what I wanted to share with you with Supplementary Aids and Services is something that I'm going to read right from IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And this is on Supplementary Aids and Services. They are aids, services, and other supports provided in regular education classes and other educational settings to enable children with disabilities to be educated with non-disabled children to the maximum extent appropriate. The primary purpose of these supports is to facilitate meaningful participation in the general curriculum and school activities, ensuring that students with disabilities receive the necessary accommodations to succeed academically and socially. So this part of the IEP is very, very important. And again, there are many parts of the IEP, but I have been going over the parts of the IEP that I think are most important. Now, listing the aids, services, and supports for children is critical, right? Because there may be something that that child really, really needs. And if the teacher is not using it in the classroom, our child, our student may not be as successful. So for example, a child may be what is developmentally appropriate for an early childhood classroom is the visual schedule. All right, so everyone is going to get that visual schedule because the teacher's going to have it every day on the board for all the children to see. But there may be a young man or young lady who needs their own individual schedule. They may need that visual right near them, that they take it with them, they have it with them at all times to remind them of what is coming next. That child may benefit from having their own individual schedule. Something else a child may need, which is a support, is something called the first then board. And those are visuals which you can use to help remind a student of what you're going to do first and then what you're going to do next. That helps remind them of what is going on. First, we're doing circle time, and then we're going to recess. So that helps remind them of what is going on, what's going to come first, and what's going to come next. And also helps with transitions. Oh, now we finished with circle time. We can put that away. Now it's time for recess. We can go outside now. That's what you wanted. And you sat down and you listened in circle time and you participated in circle time, because circle time is not always sitting, it's moving, especially in early childhood. We want to move as much as possible. So you participated in circle time, and now it's time for recess. Let's put this picture of circle time away. Boop, boop, that's done. Now it's time for recess. So that is another example of a visual that a young person might benefit from in the early childhood classroom. And if it's not listed, then the child may be having a difficult time, and that is not listed there. So that might be the issue. It needs to be listed. So when the team gathers together and they write up the supports, aids, and services in the Supplementary Aids and Services, it is important that the team is on one accord with what supports that young person. And mom and dad, you know what may work at home that maybe is not listed on the Supplementary Aids and Services. And the teachers actually can also give you ideas about things you can use at home, because I have had parents that have used that first then board when it works at school, and then they'll use it at home. Or something that we call social stories. I've used it at school to help children understand how to do certain things. It's just a visual story of how to do something. For example, a young man had difficulty, well, we used it at school for, let's say, sharing. Okay, and it takes you through the process of sharing, tells a story, and it helps children understand how to share. Well, we saw that one young man benefited from that, and so then I found a social story for him to go to bed because he had a difficult time, getting himself together and going to bed. And so that helped him understand, what, mommy it's time to say goodnight, and it took him through all of that. So you can also write that in the supplementary aids and services, that the young person benefits from the use of social stories. There's so many things that can be put in supplementary aids and services. One more thing I'll say, because this could be listed under the service page. You might think it would be listed under the service page, but I've found when I've been IEP writing and working with teams that consult services, usually instead of being listed on the service page, that is listed under supplementary aids and services. So consult services or a consult service is not a direct service. It's when someone comes in and they consult with the teacher and offer the teacher support so that they can meet that young person's needs. Lots of times consult services for speech, OT, may be listed under supplementary aids and services. All right, I think that's kind of sums it up. And for supplementary aids and services, if you have any questions, please just, feel free to ask me, because there's so many things that can go under supplementary aids and services. Again, there are aids, services, and supports. The dates need to be listed. Dates are very important on the IEP. So again, the IEP lasts a year. So the date that service or support or aid starts, and when it ends, everything should match with the date that the IEP starts and the date that the IEP ends. And usually there is a narrative. You might say first, then board, like I talked about it, like I mentioned earlier, but then you'll give a little narrative about how the first, then board helps that young person. Usually there is just a naming what it is, and then a little bit more of a description about it. Okay, let's move on to services. The service page is just that. It lists the services. If you're receiving physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language services, special education services inside the general education classroom or outside the general education classroom, or both. The dates are listed. Again, the IEP is scheduled for the year, but the specific dates that the IEP starts and ends should be listed on the service page, when the service starts and when it will end. Also, who is delivering the services? The speech language therapist, the occupational therapist, the special educator. Again, sometimes our students can receive special education services both inside the general education classroom and outside. All of that needs to be listed. There would be 2 service entries for the special education, both inside and outside. There is usually the numbers will be listed as far as the hours, and then also a narrative. And then you'll find that throughout the IEP, where you'll have a narrative explaining in more detail what is going on that page. So again, I said in supplementary aids and services, you had the name of what that support might be, the visual, and then or specifically, let's say the first then board, and then it would explain in a brief narrative what that first then board is and how it benefits the child. The same thing would go with the service page, where you would have listed specifically the amount of time that the child receives, let's say the speech language service, but then there would be a brief narrative of the service. Okay, so that is the service page. All right, so the part of the IEP that I wanted to finish up this whole series, the part of the IEP I wanted to discuss is the LRE page, or the Least Restrictive Environment page. IDA states, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act states, to the maximum extent appropriate, students with disabilities are to be educated with students who are not disabled. So we want our students to be in their least restrictive environment, because special education is not a place. It is services and support for general education. So that is the way we're looking at this. However, sometimes based on our students' needs, on our young people's needs, the most appropriate setting for them would be outside of the general education environment. And like I stated with the services, sometimes students are receiving their services both inside and outside. All of that needs to be stated on the LRE page. Why? Why is it that they need to be receiving any service outside? All right? So we're stating on that LRE page where they're receiving their service, and if they're receiving their service outside, why? And you have to get very specific as to why, because the goal is for them to receive their service inside the general education environment. I'm specifically talking about special education service here, the special education service, because with speech language services and occupational therapy and physical therapy, the children, the therapists may come in, but they also take them out for services as well. But those are related services. But when we're talking about the LRE, we're specifically talking about the special education service. And remember, special education is not a place. It is services and support for general education. All right, so that is the LRE page, and that's why it's important. I wasn't going to discuss that, but it's very important, and it's very important that parents understand that. The goal is to have children receive all the support that they need within the general education environment. And if the children need to be pulled out, then there needs to be an explanation as to why, and an understanding that this child or student needs their support. This is all based on their needs. They may need more, and they're not able to get what would best meet their needs in the general education environment. But that all needs to be stated based on observation, based on testing, based on the child's present levels, based on their needs. Okay? So that is the least restrictive environment page. All right, parents, we have come to the end of Mariama Learning series on the IEP. I hope that this series is informative, and I hope that it helps you navigate through the IEP process. I've worked with many parents over the years, and the IEP process can be quite overwhelming because it's so much information that you have to take in. Remember that you are your child's first teacher, so it is very important that you understand the process and that you feel comfortable as a member of the IEP team. Again, this is Koli Aziza with Mariama Learning, where we support early learners' needs. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. You can just, after you view the video, write questions in, or you can reach out to me. All right, thank you so much. Bye-bye for now. From Mariama Learning, where we support early learners' needs. Thank you.